Are you new to burlesque and trying to figure out who are the producers you want to work for? Maybe you have experience and you moved to a new city and you are trying to figure out the scene, reground yourself into being the new performer again. Or maybe you are a new producer and you want to make sure you are checking all of your boxes and looking profesh. Today, we're talking all about green flags. How can you protect yourself as a performer? I'm gonna go more in depth in the next video about red flags, but just a general note, nobody is perfect. There is a lot that goes into producing, which you can learn about in any of my producing videos in my producing playlist. And sometimes even when you know how to produce well and you are a great producer, sometimes life happens. Some people are brand new and figuring things out and making honest, genuine mistakes. What is professional, what is ethical, and what is centering people? So let's dive right on in, right into green flags. Very first thing I look for producers is reputation. Do they have a good reputation? Have I been paying attention to them on social media? How do I see them talking about the performers and the community around them? And also, have I talked to other performers and producers who know them? Often producers who are good are people who will have people talking good about them. I always ask around if I've never worked with a producer before. If I'm traveling and someone in a different city asks me to come to their show to see how are they? Do they seem really solid as a producer? Do they center equitable practices? Did people feel safe backstage? And people in burlesque tend to be very honest about whether they've had a positive or a negative experience with a producer. And I feel like word of mouth and that personal lived experience is one of the strongest ways to learn about an individual's reputation. I still like to talk to the producer and ask them questions. I do have a video that does say questions to ask and things to know upon hire, which you can watch after this video to know what to look for. Beyond just talking directly to the producer, I do make sure to check in with those who have also worked in with them. As well, just some small things. This is more of I think a skilled producer or an advanced producer who might have really solid foundations with producing, their processes lined up, they know their venues. One thing that I really appreciate is the producers who are willing to do the small things. This is not mandatory. I don't think negatively of anybody who doesn't do this stuff, because this is, I think, the personal touches. But I love when producers are willing to put in their own personal touches into their shows or their events to make people feel cared for, valued, and safe. For example, some people I know give thank you cards to the performers and volunteers, asking for allergy information from performers, so if I have snacks backstage to keep people's energy up, and also if they're able to and willing to provide accommodations to help you out if you're visiting the city, if you're traveling. I've had some awesome producers who have set me up with local people, either to keep me at their house so I don't have to pay for a hotel. Definitely for me, I think those small personal touches that make a huge difference. And for professionalism, we exist in a world and an industry where there are ways to keep things organized and orderly and keep people happy. Also making sure we do care for our teams and our performers in a good way, and making sure that we do have the proper practices in place. So if stuff comes up, we feel like we're on the ball and we understand what is expected as us as producers. So often when we talk about professionalism in business or in society, often it's talking about things like you have to make eye contact, otherwise you're shady and you're hiding something. You have to have a loud, clear voice so people can understand you. Otherwise, if you mumble, you're not very confident, or you need to be on time all the time. You have to point your toes if you are dancing barefoot, etc., etc., etc. All of those examples that I just gave do not consider things like accessibility, of whether or not people can even point their feet. They don't take into consideration different cultural differences or different ways of being, or even if people get excited backstage. Sometimes we just forget. We all get excited, things happen, and people have different life circumstances as well. Sometimes people have children, people get stuck in traffic. For me, I really admire the producers who understand different lived circumstances and also are willing to adapt and be flexible and meet the performers where they're at. I also really understand when producers do kind of get that panic. I produce, so I get that. I understand when producers have their timelines, they need their show notes on time so they can give it to the technicians and so they can make sure people are at the show when the show starts. Like, I understand it. I get it. I want all of that. But there are times when you have to be adaptable. So for me, I believe professional producers are the ones who have their own boxes ticked. When do I get show notes? When do I need music by? When do I need people coming to the show for? All of that should be figured out before they've hired their performers. And they understand how their brain works. They understand what works for them. But I really appreciate when producers are willing to put in the extra work for their show so that their performers can be best prepared. So for this video, I actually asked performers of what are some of their green flags with producers as well. One that came up often was that producers who are professional on and off stage. We exist beyond our stages. We exist backstage, we exist in community, we exist in the world. Can they be professional backstage as well as off stage? Do they trust their teams and the technicians to be professionals as well? Most of the individuals who we work with for our shows, whether that's technicians, MCs, performers, stage kittens or managers, the bar staff, the photographers, almost everybody who is in those positions are professionals. There's definitely times when we have volunteers, but we should still treat them like professionals and like they know what they're doing. Does the producer still trust them and have open, clear communication with expectations in the beginning and be available for questions if they need it? They can step in if they need to let people be professional and do their job without being micromanaged. As well, do they give clear communication to everybody in the beginning? Every producer I work with has different practices, different values, different types of shows, different ways to be organized. So I really appreciate when a producer is willing to be communicative in the very beginning of this is what to expect, this is what the show's about, here's the accessibility information, here's when I need your due dates, here's the pay scale, here's when you'll be paid, etc. Anyone who can communicate well, in my mind, makes a huge difference. Are they flexible and adaptable if something happens, if a performer calls in sick, if they have to suddenly jump on the microphone themselves, if the MC is sick? Again, this is a skill that takes time. I don't expect every brand new producer to have this. I had to develop this myself and I'm still learning, especially when I use new venues. On a related note, can the producer be honest and transparent if they cannot meet an expectation or need? Often we don't get to pick our show dates. Ended up on a very specific like Juneteenth, or it ended up on one short day, or it ended up on another really culturally significant date, and that producer is not from that community. Are they doing the work outside of that to either donate raffle ticket sales to an organization related to that? Are they hiring guest speakers or performers maybe to speak on the significance of that day? Are they gonna speak about the importance of that day? Are they gonna promote the importance of that day on social media around their production? What other steps do they take to make up for those situations? As well, do they have a code of conduct? Even if it is a basic one paragraph, few sentences, whatever works for them. Do they have clear expectations of the performers and what is and isn't okay backstage? One thing that can be hard as a producer sometimes is favoritism, even if it is unintentional. The reality is we live in a world as burlesque performers where as producers we have to hype our casts up, whether that's on social media, whether that's backstage, whether that's if we're meeting and talking with our performers, if we have an MC on the microphone. We're allowed to have friends in burlesque, we're allowed to be friends with the people we hire, but we have to make sure that we are aware of our own biases, and we also have to be able to give as much love to the other performers who are not our best friends, and really making sure like we are conscious of potential favoritism. As well, going back to the idea of knowing producing and knowing what to do, does the producer do their job thoroughly and properly and check everything before the show to limit any potential downslides. So that looks like things like listening to the performer's music, every performer before the show, to make sure that there's no racial slurs in the music, there's no cultural appropriation. Do they look at performer applications for those shows to ensure they know what's going to be on those stages? And on that, I'm going to move right on to ethical and equitable practices. Does the producer center equity and accountability and inclusion and really actually put in the work to foster belonging in the productions? That's a lot of words. The most basic, very first thing that I personally look for, I look at the casts of every single show. Do they hire people of color? Not only people of color, but do they hire black and brown visible people of color? Do they hire immigrants? Do they have diverse intersectional representation of the people who are in those shows beyond just one or two tokens or the same performers of color every time? This stuff matters. Do they hire people with disabilities? Do they hire people with diverse body sizes and types, big bodies? Do they have authentic representation on those stages? That is my biggest thing I personally look for, and it does show when a producer is willing to put in that work off stage and again outside of their casting does happen. You just see more and more representation, diversity on the stages when that producer does the work behind the scenes and off stage. Do they center intersectional forms of accessibility? Do they have shows that are at venues where people in wheelchairs or mobility aids? Do they have those shows at venues that are accessible in that way, including the washroom? Do they have shows that are at venues where people can use the main entrance without having to go into a back alleyway or a side door or a kitchen door or a staff door, which actually does the opposite effect? Even though a show might be accessible with special accommodations, it others those people going through that side door. I can really tell when producers are putting in the work to not only make sure people can get into the venue, but make sure they're doing it in a humane way. As well as accessibility, I kind of mentioned this already, but it bears repeating. Do they provide accessibility information in advance? That can be upon hire, that can be in the tech notes, if they have a website. For my festivals, IFTs and the Shade Burlesque Festival, I provide accessibility guides, which talk about all the features, accommodations we take, limitations of accessibility in every venue that we take up or that we occupy. A lot of the time people think of accessibility as wheelchair users or getting in the door. There's a lot more that goes into accessibility. So for example, some more options that I've seen producers do is have a quiet space for people to like have blankets or fidget toys or coloring sheets if they want to watch the show but need to like ground themselves. Do they allow people to have fidget toys in the audience to help them stay grounded? For my shows, some of the things that I also do is I provide free masks and free earplugs and sanitizer at the door. So there's many different ways. I know there's shows that are low sensory, that have low music, low lighting, make it so that people who have more sensitivities to noise or people in close proximity, they'll have people spaced out. So there's many different ways to have an accessible show. I'm not going to go into every single detail in this video, but that is something that I really notice when a producer is willing to put in that work. Do they hire photographers and videographers and other staff who understand equity and who understand fairness? I have seen a lot of photographers who will take hundreds of photos of a show, thousands of photos, but they'll only give 50 photos to the very conventionally attractive or the white or the slim performers, and anyone who is considered outside of the norm. People with bigger bodies, maybe people in wheelchairs, people who have mobility aids with them on stage, people of color, especially people who are black or brown. I've seen so many people from marginalized communities get way less photos than conventionally attractive people. Not only that, but often not the same quality of photos. So does the producer hire photographers who are actually willing to give everybody the same quality and quantity of photos in the cast, regardless of identity and physical looks. Also, beyond just doing the thing, this is more of, I think, like a skill, specifically a photographer skill. Do they know how to take photos of people with darker skin? That's kind of a thing, collaborating between the photographer and the technician. Being a producer, if they know that in advance, to have that conversation so that the performers can get the best photos possible or the best video possible, that is huge. For a lot of shows, for me, bare minimum, doesn't matter where, anywhere in North America. I don't expect this every time because I've seen it very rarely, to be honest. Does the show do a land acknowledgement? Not just in the sense of acknowledging the people's land and territory who they are producing on. Do they do it in a good and an authentic way? Are they able to pronounce the nations who they are speaking about? Are they able to be present and in the moment? Are they doing it to also say calls to action, directing their audience to how they can support reconciliation in Canada and the United States? Are they bringing awareness to issues? Are they able to speak on some of the information that they're allowed to share about their territories they live on? There's no one right way to give a land acknowledgement except for to make it authentic and to put in the work to make sure you at least respect the nations, to do your homework in advance and practice it in advance. I can feel like they're internalizing what they're saying versus this show happens on the territories of these people. The end. Practice, 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 and check in with people in advance even to say, this is how I'm saying it. Is this correct? Going on YouTube to hear how people say it, or going on First Voices to hear the pronunciation of different names and different languages. They are one very, very small step towards reconciliation. Beyond that, what goes into your land acknowledgement is just as essential, if not more important, than the actual land acknowledgement itself. Similar to equity, do they center consent in their shows? In a lot of burlesque shows, the majority of performers, we are used to housekeeping at the beginning. If a performer is off stage and coming to mingle, that's not an invitation to touch them. That's kind of the bare basics of what we tend to see. For me, the extra layer that goes above that is, does the housekeeping and the MC go to the next level of mutual consent? I've seen lots of shows where the MC will actually talk about both consent for the performer and the audience. I've seen producers who have signs on the table that people can choose in advance to say, don't interact with me. But the more common one I tend to see is the MC say, if you don't want to be interacted with, cross your arms, or like do an X, or make it something very visible so the performer can see as they're coming up to you. If they don't want to be interacted with, I'll leave you alone. For me, making sure that consent does go both ways is huge. Do they take consent into practice when they are doing things like show promotion? Are they only sharing what they're permitted to share on the MC microphone if they're hosting? Are they sharing photos that they've been given permission to use, or are they grabbing them off social media? Personally, I am very uncomfortable if I find out that a producer is somebody who will just grab photos of a performer off a social media page without permission or without asking if it's okay to use that specific photo, as well as identity. Are they able to only share what a performer is comfortable with being shared publicly? For me, consent is way more than just the physical touch aspect. Are we respecting performers' autonomy and their own lived experiences, and making sure we give them respect and not doing anything that they were not expecting us to do with their image? As well, payment. We all know how much I love to talk about payment. Our producers very transparent from the very beginning about what you're gonna get paid. If you ask for a contract, are they willing to have a contract and have it in writing with how much you're gonna get paid? And do they honor that? Do they honor a performer's rate, or are they willing to negotiate if a performer's rate is higher than what the producer is offering? And do they treat them, again, like professionals? Because we are our own contractors, even if we often do this as a hobby for many people, and different ways that we determine what we want to charge for our performances. Do they pay you on time? Green flag, very, very top, one of my top green flags in addition to all the equity pieces. Do they pay on time? Do they tell you in advance when to expect payment and how to expect payment? Do they collect what they need from you to pay you properly in advance? So if they do an e-transfer in Canada, do they take your e-transfer information? If they pay you on PayPal, do they take your PayPal information? If they pay you in cash, etc. So making sure you have anything to do with money as clear as possible in the very beginning and continually having those transparent conversations until the show. And if there's ever an issue where payment is going to be late, will the producer at least be honest in advance without you having to chase them down? And so one of the biggest themes, I've talked about a lot of things so far that are green flags. A lot of them I think are skills that take time to really get good at, really figure out where your boundaries as a producer are, where your skills are, where some areas of growth are. Often with producing, there's a lot of things outside of our control, such as ticket sales. Will performers send show stuff on time? Will they show up, or are they gonna be sick? There's so much that could happen. There could be weather, there could be a storm outside that stops your show, there could be a fire. But making sure that those skills are continually getting developed. Is that producer regularly building their own skills, whatever that looks like to them? I really believe producers should be regularly taking workshops either about producing, about budgeting, definitely about accessibility and inclusion and creating safe spaces. For me, I think those are some of the most essential pieces of producing. It takes time to redevelop skills or to learn skills and unlearn behaviors and relearn about barriers and what barriers to remove and how to elevate your shows in a way that they are including more people, making them feel like they're not just a token representative in your show or in your audience, but are you doing the work to make sure you learn? We don't know what we don't know, and there's always more to know. So I find it a huge green flag when producers are willing to put in the work for their own professional and personal development. A huge green flag for me is when producers are willing to own their mistakes, admit when they've messed up. Can they take accountability no matter how small or how big of a mistake they may have made? Are they willing to acknowledge if they've been called in? I really have a lot of respect. It takes, again, I think it's a skill. I do think it takes practice because we're just raised in a society that tells us you shouldn't take responsibility and there's always other things and there's good intentions. For me, those are so many skills and things that I've had to unlearn for myself when I was younger and relearn different ways to communicate and to be accountable. And even if people have loved my shows, even if I've had times where I've had 90 amazing reviews and then one really bad one, they felt like they couldn't enjoy the show because of people around them. That's still their lived experience, and I can't say, well, these 90 people like the show, so this is a you problem. I don't believe in that. I think even just acknowledging someone's lived experience is not the same as everyone else's. And there are definitely times where sometimes people are entitled, or there are people who think the show should run around them because they bought a VIP ticket. So there's definitely boundaries and there's definitely like a scale to it. But generally, I do believe that most of the time it is just different lived experiences, and I'm not always going to understand another person's experience, and so that's okay. It can be hard sometimes, it can be a little bit awkward at times, but again, adaptability is a producer willing to have those conversations. One other huge green flag to me, which I think is probably the most common green flag that people notice, does the producer actually feel like they like producing, and do they actually get excited for those shows? Are they hyped? Are they excited to meet you? Are they excited to have you in those shows? If I see a producer who's genuinely loves producing and genuinely is excited for the show coming up or any cast they've had in the past, to me that's huge. I've only been doing it for a few years, but I know even after a few years, it can be easy to get tired, to get burnt out. I really, really love seeing when there's still the passion and there's still excitement and inspiration to produce. That leaks out, and that makes me excited to be in that show. There are so many amazing producers I've worked with in my life in burlesque, many of them in my own local city, many of them outside of it. Even on social media, seeing what different producers do in those shows and the reputations they build and how people talk about different producers has been such a big thing for me personally. I don't think I would be nearly as comfortable as I am today with navigating productions and different shows. I still have a lot of shows I've been in and continue to be in where I'm unsure, where I'm like, this is a yellow flag. I do think as new performers, it is such a big landscape and a lot of things to know. And often I think when we have these conversations, we talk about the red flags, but we don't know what good looks like. We know what danger looks like, but do we know what safety looks like? Or do we know what ethical practices look like? I really admire the producers who are willing to put in that work to ensure that it's not just a show about them to get celebrated or to show off their friends, but making sure they're putting in the work to uplift their performers, their community, the burlesque community, recognizing important information and how to produce well. So I'm curious, I gave some of my green flags, some of those people submitted to me as well. Did I miss any? What are some of your green flags? Leave them down below. Otherwise, next time we're talking about red flags, and I will be asking the same question then. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye!